Cool. Great. Welcome everyone to this month's beautiful Black books presented by Poetry Center San Jose with host Santa Clara County poet Laureate Tshaka Campbell and featuring writer, poet, and educator Mr. JJ Bola from London, England, born in Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo. My name is Robert Pesich, president of Poetry Center San Jose, with co-producer of BBB and director of volunteer support, Jolinda Ledee. So when you see Jolinda at programs in person, please give her a warm welcome. We'll begin today's program with a land acknowledgement and information about upcoming events. We acknowledge that the city of San Jose is made up of the unceded territory of the Muwekma Ohlone tribe, who trace their ancestry through the local mission system. We remember and acknowledge that this land was taken through violence and dishonesty. We remember the connection the Ohlone people have to this region and give thanks for the opportunity to continue to live, work, pray on their traditional homeland. Let us take a moment of silence now to pay respect to their elders and to all Ohlone people of the past and present. Thank you. Now for some words about our support. Poetry Center San Jose is a member-supported organization and is funded in part by grants from Applied Materials Foundation, the City of San Jose's Office of Cultural Affairs, Knight Foundation, Poets and Writers, Silicon Valley Community Foundation, and SV Creates in partnership with the County of Santa Clara and the California Arts Council, and supported in part by a SV Creates National Endowment of the Arts American Rescue Plan grant. We also thank Ann and Mark's Art Party and Brandenburg Family Foundation for their generous giving. Please submit later on a quick survey about the event to help us improve our logistics and content and report to our funders and sponsors. That link will show up in the chat. And some upcoming events at Poetry Center San Jose. We have Bashar returning this month, Sunday, October 30th, from 2:30 to 5 p.m. live and in person at Shiv Durga Temple. That's on 3550 Flora Vista Avenue. And this program to be hosted by Anshu Jori and Sanjay Mathur. We have also readings by Santa Clara County poet Laureate Tshaka Campbell and San Francisco poet laureate Tongo Eisen Martin in celebration of Triton Museum's exhibition Lawrence Ferlinghetti, painter, poet, and pacifist. This event takes place live in person Saturday, November 5th, and that's at 6 p.m., 1505 Warburton Avenue, and it is free. And finally, Well Read will feature Professor, poet Ruth Nolan and Georgiana Valois Sanchez, poet, professor, and member of the Coastal Band of the Chumash Nation and chair of the Chumash Women's Elders Council for the Wishtoyo Foundation. That is Tuesday, November 8th, Zoom. So that's election night. So when the madness is too much, tune in into that program. All right. Now, for more information about these events and others, you can just visit pcsj.org. Enough of me. Let's go to Tshaka and JJ. Thank you so much. Tshaka, what do you got?
Thank you. Thanks, Rob and Jolinda. So guys, welcome to BBB. Thank you for taking time out from your early morning, afternoon. If you're joining in from the UK, taking time out of your evening. But BBB, Beautiful Black Books, is brought to you by Poetry Center San Jose. Just a little bit about the program. Right? This is a reoccurring program featuring Black writers and authors in conversation, followed by a Q&A. We also get the author a chance to read some of their work and share with the audience. But in the whole, this is really a vessel of exchange. We want to bring Black writers to our communities and our communities to these writers to learn more about, their sources of information, what things were formative in their building their career to where they are today. So with all that being said, a little bit about guest of honor. Now, I've got to take my breath because this brother has done a lot. So here we go. JJ Bola is a writer, poet, educator, born in Democratic Republic of Congo and raised in London. He's also an ambassador for the United Nations High Council for Refugees and has an MA in creative writing from Birkbeck University. JJ also works as a mental health social worker in a community mental health team after qualifying through the Think Ahead Accelerated Training Program. His debut novel, No Place, I say model because he's a model. See what I did there? Okay. His debut novel, No Place to Call Home, was published in the United Kingdom in 2017 and in the United States in 2018, and then later translated into French. And I mean, you'll see as we go through, I mean, most of this brother's work has been translated, so it is just, it is well received and absorbed by the masses. He's written the nonfiction book Mask Off, Masculinity Redefined, published in 2019 by Pluto Press. It's also been translated into other languages. How do they do that when they do the there it is. I don't know. There it is, look. Anyway, I don't sell makeup. They do it well when you do the TikTok things, makeup. I don't know how to do it. Anyway, second novel, The Selfless Act of Breathing, was published in 2001 in the UK and in the US in North America in 2022. That has also been translated. JJ Bola has 3 previous poetry collections, Elevate, Daughter of the Sun, and Word, all of which were published in a definitive book called Refugee. This brother is working. He's based in London, but often travels across the UK and internationally for workshops, lectures, and talks. He is passionate about empowering people to transform their lives and loves basketball and carrot cake. Man after my own heart, man. He is currently working on yet another novel, Welcome. And I am so honored and humbled that you're joining us today and being part of the program, brother. It's so good to see you. It's been over 15 years, 12, 15 years, it's got to be.
Yeah, Tshaka, I mean, firstly, thank you so much for having me. I feel humbled, honored, privileged to be in conversation with you here now. Appreciate the bio readout. I find bios so awkward. I was gonna be like, yeah, let's just cut it. But I think you mentioned the 2 most important things, which was my love for basketball and carrot cake, which gets often like overlooked. And I think that really touched me. So I appreciate that. But yeah, also for every one of you joining from wherever you are and whatever time it is, really appreciate you guys joining us. And I know I'm a guest, but if you can just allow me to say that, like, Tshaka, you are, for me, when I first started writing and getting up on stage at open mic nights with my trembling hand, like holding this piece of paper, trying to convince these people that I kind of know what I'm doing. Like, you were one of the people who I saw and was like, I want to do what that brother's doing. Like, how does he get his words to do that? I want to do that, and I've watched countless of your videos, and your poems have inspired me along my journey. So for that alone and many other things, I want to say thank you. But yeah, let's chat, man.
I appreciate that, man. I do. You're often we go, and we'll touch on this as well, but often, when you're doing whatever work it is that you're doing, you get to these points where you're kind of like, do I matter? You know what I mean? And so I really do appreciate that. And you have no idea how that hits me right now. So I want to say that, but move away from me. This is about you and your flowers, right? You've got to. I hear you in the bio, and we all get awkward, but you've made and done some amazing things, and you got to get your flowers. Number one. Number two, just as you said, there's someone on this call. There's someone that's going to see this later on that has been like, I've seen it. They may not show up right now, but I've because I secretly stalk. It's on.
We all do.
Yeah, it's known now.
It's the age of stalking, like it's fine.
No. So I see people listen to you. I see people referencing you. I see, when folks put out a scroll of their books, right? Look at my poetry books, and your books are there. So,
wow.
You may not see it all the time, and that's in part what this program is about. Is, like I said, is bringing the communities to these artists, but also these artists to the communities, right? Because you're not always, as you said, not always sort of abreast of all the things that are happening and the folks you touch, right? And so you are making impact, my friend, whether you see it or not. But yeah, so we'll go through a couple of questions. We'll get some time for you to read for us, and then just sort of bear with me as I go all over the place, because that's what I do. But the first question, and the most important question I'll start off with, is the season just started. So who's going to be this year's NBA champions, right? Or rather, let me rephrase it. Why the Warriors going to be repeat winners?
Oh, man. Oh, why are you going to do me like this? The mad thing is I can't even argue against you. Like, you know what I mean? I'm a LeBron fan. I'm a Lakers fan.
Yeah.
And as much as I want to say them, like, we're kind of looking like garbage right now. So I'm not trying to get my hopes up. But yeah, man, I mean, the Warriors, if Draymond can stay out of fights, I think you guys can win.
No, I get you. I too, have feeling that Laker woe, not because I'm a Laker fan, but truth be told, I grew up in London and New York, right? And so my team is Knicks. Now, I'm not sure the Knicks are actually playing basketball. I'm not sure that maybe like this hybrid track hockey thing. I don't know what they're doing, but for the league for years. But I'm always going to be a Knicks fan. But what I do appreciate is good basketball.
Yeah,
really appreciate good basketball, and that's what the Warriors have been playing. But anyway, I wanted to get that out the way because I know, and I think we've played once or twice maybe together, at least. If not, this is somewhere in Hackney years ago.
Possibly, yeah. When we had, I think when I had good knees. I don't have good.
That's what I was just about to say. When I had one good knee, now I drive past the basketball court and tears. I can't. All right, so that's sorted. Now your bio says you're an ambassador for the United Nations High Council and Refugees. I didn't know this. Talk to me a little bit about like what that is and like what that entails, how that came about.
So I mean, that came about in an interesting way because my family came to the UK from Congo as refugees, and the majority of people that I knew were refugees coming into this country, and it was an experience for me that took some understanding and like some navigating, especially as I came here young enough to be able to quite seamlessly immerse myself into UK or British culture, where people didn't really need to question me in terms of like my documentation. The only questioning was perhaps on the basis of race. And so when the more I started to realize that a lot of people don't actually know the story of refugees and so forth, and that's when I started to kind of embed it into my poetry. And actually, I don't know if you'll remember this, but I wrote a poem called Refuge. And there was a time after an event when you came to me and you said, wow, like how that poem impacted you. Yeah. And I was like, what? This must be a good poem.
No,
Tshaka likes it. I mean, it's got the seal of approval. And then the UNHCR were at a point where, you know, a lot of their ambassadors were these kind of like, you know, these movie stars and celebs and so forth who still passionate about the cause, but they were quite removed from the experience and from kind of like talking about the reality of it. So they approached me and a few others to kind of like share our journey and share our art and kind of raise awareness about it. And so that's what it really entails, like just whether I'm kind of writing or attending different events or could just kind of generally raising awareness. It kind of is a way for people to see that everyday kind of closer reality and experience of like what the refugee story is. And the refugee story is different for everyone. You know, now we're hearing a lot about like kind of like the migrant issues and, you know, crossing the sea and the wall and so forth. But it ranges in its complexity. And so I think the more stories we can get out there, the more people will be able to understand what it means to be a refugee.
Yeah. No, that's amazing, man. And I do remember that poem. I wrote a series of haikus off of that poem.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I do remember that poem. It deeply impacted me, more just specifically the kind of what you're talking about. I mean, you're talking about the refugee story, which then to me then rolled into the immigrant story. And then early when I moved back to England, right? And so I felt out of place. Like I was born here, right? But now I was considered a Yankee, but my parents are Indian, right? And so it was like I was actually coming back home, but it didn't feel like I was back home, depending on what space I was in. I didn't know where to fit. So it hit me at a time when I was struggling a lot, sort of where I place. And so, you know, it was important to me, and I think just important to talk about this refugee story. I mean, if you think about like what the media puts out there, right? There's a certain narrative around the refugee, and you tell me if I'm wrong. I just feel like in the UK, especially, there's this sort of, and probably parts of Europe anyway, there's this thought of like anyone coming in here is now draining our resources and blah blah blah. So there's this,
absolutely,
you know, thing associated with. So, you know, the fact that you're out there sort of telling what the true story, you know, is and what this means. Like folks, I think it was Washa, someone put a poem, I don't remember the poem now, but it's like, they said something about the fact that like no one just runs out of a home and goes to a different country because it's vacation. So there's stuff that there is something behind that folks need to understand and, you know, get.
And as well, like, it's like people don't understand that, like, in the history of humanity, for whatever reason, right? No one has ever just stayed in the same place. Do you know what I mean?
Right. No,
there's more people, like people, especially if you look at even like, you know, indigenous communities have always migrated from one place to another. Like that movement is quite normal. And so even for myself, from like, you know, my background is Congolese. So I'm quite tied into my Congolese identity and my kind of like African identity as well. But my surname is Bola. That's quite a popular Nigerian name. And so growing up, people would always assume that I'm Nigerian. And I would get quite frustrated. But I did the research, and there was a massive, during the 15th century, migration of people from the Congo kingdoms to West Africa, including like Igbo land and Yoruba land. And so I'm like, hold on, that could be me as well. Do you know what I mean? And so there's part of me over there, and there's part of me also in different other places. We are made up of so many parts. And I think this kind of idea that you're just from one place and that's it, like, is, you know, kind of fostering this false idea of like purity or elitism that just isn't true. And the fact is like migration has been a net positive for humanity across the board. Like there's absolutely not a single culture that has thrived in isolation. And so if we can get people to understand that whether it's the foods you eat or the music you listen to or the technology or the arts, whatever it is, you have been influenced and impacted deeply by people who come from places that you are refusing them access to your so-called country. Do you know what I mean? So what does it mean to consume a person's culture, art, history, etc., but not to actually allow the person, you know? And so and a lot of people don't realize this. Like in the UK national dish, right, is a curry.
Yes.
Like that is Indian food. That's the purest Indian food.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people will say that without even analyzing like why.
Right.
Why that's an anomaly.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes it's just like making something that isn't obvious, so people can understand it's a lot more complicated than it seems.
Yeah. No, absolutely, man. I think, you know, it's this, I think about that a lot. And it's this, you know, at least for me, it's this, you know, it's this Western sort of ideal about ownership, right? When you start introducing ownership, the idea of, like you said, the idea of this migration then sort of, well, it kind of stops and stops, right? It's just sort of, you want to own where you are, right? When that's not enough, then you got the only migration becomes now conquering. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
You know, and there's no assimilation, there's no any of that, right? So it's yeah, it is definitely what I like to call, or my brother Ainsley Burroughs, a disease. It is in fact a disease. You touched on, you know, being from the Congo and being sort of deep rooted into that. How does that influence your work, or the way you write or things you write about?
I think it definitely massively influences my work on many levels. I would say on the first level would definitely be in terms of like imagination and kind of creativity. You know, Congolese people, we have such kind of freedom of expression and creativity in our communities, from the way we dress to the music that we made. And I don't know if people have heard like of the sapels, that kind of style of like flamboyant and elegant dressing, which a lot of the masculine men would do, right? But elsewhere in the world, it's kind of seen as more effeminate. But for us and our culture, it's just creativity. And also the music, the Congolese jazz, the rumba, the old school kind of bands that sang songs that were romantic. Like for me, those are the kind of music that I grew up listening to, and found it very kind of like normal for those styles of expression, kind of for me to hear those styles of expression and also to emulate that. And also like in my novels, all my main characters are Congolese, you know, write what you know type of thing. And I just think that for me, it's a matter of perspective. Like, what's your vantage point? What's your center? I always give the example that kind of the impact of language on that. So, for example, in English, we say the sun is rising, right? Sunrise, the sun is rising. You know, and visually we are seeing the sun rise up in the sky. But in Lingala, which is one of the four Congolese main languages, we say Tongo ezotana. So it's kind of like to say the sun is appearing, or the morning is coming. So it's like the sun is coming forward to you. Right. And I think that matter of perspective kind of offers you two different realities in which you could write from. You know, and they're both poetic in their own way. Yeah. Like the sun is rising. You know that the sun doesn't rise. Like we rotate around the sun. So matter of factly, that's actually false, but actually it's very poetic in another way. And to say, well, in the Lingala, the sun is appearing. So it's something as if like something's coming from far away and drawing itself nearer to you, which is another kind of poetic perspective. And I think that I always try to see, well, I've had the majority of my life kind of in a Western education. What can I imagine when I blend my culture, this culture, and all the cultures that I've been influenced by, and try to create something that is unique in and of itself.
Yeah, that's amazing, dude. And again, this is, you know, everything that you're saying keeps coming, bringing me back to this migration conversation and the sharing, right, of information, of culture, and things of that sort. And there was a smile when you talked about just the language and how it gives you a different perspective of things, right? I think about that with Spanish sometimes, right? Just the way in where it's someone of this place, like Del Mar, of the sea, you know what I mean? So, you know, it's funny how in some cultures you don't disassociate yourself with the thing that is, you know what I mean? So
yeah.
hearing you say that brings a smile, because it just makes me feel like I'm not crazy. Other people, some of these.
And you know what? But this is the fascinating thing I find about language, right? It's like, and I always try to encourage people to, if you can, obviously it's not easy to learn another language, but if you can, try to at least kind of embed yourself in another language, culture, or multiple languages and cultures, so that you can get as wide of experience as possible in terms of like what may be your reality. So it might be that the culture you're born into is incongruent with your values, with your perspectives, with the way that you see the world, right? And it might be maybe like an influence from this culture and that culture, et cetera, that might actually help you to understand the world in a better way.
Yeah.
And we don't realize how, you know, civilization, et cetera, impacts us in terms of the way that we see the world, and it impacts our psyche and our mental health. And even like there's mental health research, for example, that shows that people who may hear voices or, for example, have schizophrenia in terms of like those symptoms of hearing voices, in the West, those voices tend to be more negative and harmful. But across the global South, those voices are reported to be more positive, almost like a friend or a counselor or someone of a guide.
Right.
And so the way that mental health is perceived, if you're in the West, it's kind of like, well, this is something that is kind of harmful. But if you're another part of the world, they will tell you, well, actually, in this part of the world, this is what we believe this thing to be, you know. And we're seeing that across the board in terms of like, if you look at the conversation now in terms of like gender, in terms of masculinity and so forth. Like in the West, we have quite a rigid masculinity. Guys are feeling quite frustrated about themselves because maybe like they want to express themselves, etc., but there isn't a pathway for it here. And then in another culture, you go somewhere, I mean, I write about this in Mask Off, like you go somewhere and you're holding hands with another guy walking down the street, and that's just normal, you know? So you don't feel that isolation and that ostracization that one culture would give you, but another culture opens up to you and invites you in. And so I think just kind of like trying to immerse yourself respectfully in different cultures opens up your worlds and broaden your horizons massively.
Absolutely. Now, and we're going to jump in. I got some couple of questions later on to talk, you know, to dive a little bit into that, because I think there's a really important piece. But I want to kind of go back a little bit, and, you know, I love Marvel, right? And I love I tell you, I go all over the place. I love creation stories, right? And so, like, what's your creation story? I know you started the poetry with, you know,
I love, oh my gosh, do you know what? No one's ever asked this question, and it's something I think about all the time. I love this question. So I'm going to tell you what one of the Congo creation stories is, and then I'll tell you my own kind of like understanding of how I think I came to be, right? So one of the Congo, kind of the Congo spiritual system, in this creation story is that the universe was created or came to be, rather, and the first being was a person or an entity called Kimahungu, which is like the original human, if you will, the original being. And this being was both masculine and feminine, and it came onto planet Earth and multiplied itself like again and again and again and populated the world, right? So I'm like, wow, one thing was just here and just went, and suddenly there's all these, you know, in different variations. That's amazing. In terms of my own, so I don't have any baby pictures. The youngest picture I have of me is about 4 or 5 years old. And I love, you know, you mentioned Marvel, I love the Silver Surfer, right? To me, the Silver Surfer is like the refugee of superheroes, right? His hometown was destroyed. He had to flee. He's now working for this super powerful kind of overlord who, you know, he has to serve in one way or another. And he's trying to find people who can somehow like connect him back to his home. And so that combined with the fact that I don't have any baby pictures and my youngest pictures of when I'm like 4 or 5 years old, and bringing in a Superman story without the whole kind of like Superman superpowers, because I think Superman's quite generally a bit of a boring superhero. I like to think that kind of my hometown was like a planet somewhere, right? Like Zenla, which is like, you know, Silver Surfer's original hometown. And it was peaceful and it was reflective. People lived in harmony. And then, boom, like had to flee, crash landed on Earth. My parents picked me up in a field somewhere and was like, who's this baby? Okay, I'm going to raise this baby. And then I'm just in Congo, and I'm just my parents' baby. And, you know, they can't prove that I'm their child because they don't have any baby pictures. So they've just made up the story of when I was born and blah, blah, blah. But I'm really from this place because certain things don't make sense to me here. And I'm like, you know, like peace is such an easy concept for me. And I'm like, why do we make this so difficult? Right? So I'm like, in my head, I must be from somewhere where it's just like, it must be peaceful. You know? So that's my kind of like wild imagination processing that.
That's fantastic though. Probably, I mean, unpacking that and just hearing you go through that, you see some of the similarities in terms of like coming, you know, for me at least, what I see there is coming to the UK and being in this place that's unfamiliar, but then having to assimilate, right? While at the same time, you're kind of like, I know I'm not of this place, but I've got to sort of, you know, mask, right? in this space. No, that would love to, like when there's no BBB, we're gonna chat it up about that part alone. That's great. I love it. Now when I read, well, before I even get to that, like there's, you know, I think sometimes when I see sort of how you're moving and all of the things that you're doing, I think of like James Brown, you're like the hardest working man in show business. And so, you know, I imagine, you know, you've got work on all these novels, you're doing all of this stuff. Now, I imagine that it takes a great deal of sort of research to shape and like finish the work and sort of create it, so to speak. How long does it usually take you, or what's your process to put a, you know?
What I found is that each piece of work, so whether it's a poem, a poetry collection, a book, nonfiction book, is its own entity. Do you know what I mean? And there's two types. In terms of when I say how long, is firstly, one way to think about it would be how long does it take from A to B in terms of when I started putting the words on the page to when I finish, right? And the other way is how long does it take for the experiences to accumulate, right? That fully forms the ideas that you're going to put into this book. Right. And those are two different things. Do you know what I mean? So generally, like what I found is one thing always leads into the other. So I wrote Refuge as the poem ages ago, but then came No Place to Call Home, right? Which was a novel. And that really came about because I wrote about my refugee experience, but I didn't feel like it was enough. And I wanted to keep writing poems, but I felt like I had too much to say. And my poems were generally long anyway. And I was like, I can't just write one long poem. Like, so I thought, okay, let me try something else. And my ideas are I'm always just trying things. And, you know, I feel quite lucky because I think for me, it's more about just like perseverance, like, and just trying, even if it's just trying badly. Like I say, you know, I do a bit of like, I do some creative writing workshops and some teaching around creative writing. And I say to people, look, man, if I can have a book published and my first draft was as bad as it was, like literally anyone can do it. Because all you have to do is finish. Like the first draft, it's not supposed to be good. People often compare their first draft to the final published versions of books in stores, right? And I'm like, that's two different things. Like it's like you're comparing someone who, you know, make it a basketball analogy, who just played their first kind of like middle school game to someone in the NBA. Like, do you know what I mean? It's just no comparison.
Yeah.
And so for me, like a lot of the work that I've done, I think it might feel like I'm doing a lot, or it might seem like I'm doing a lot, but I feel like it's just the formation of things that I've been thinking about over the past 10, 15 years, just coming together, you know? And I'm always thinking, okay, what can I write next? What can I write next? What can I write after? And like now I've already got like the next 3 books in my head. And like, there's always ideas, there's always stuff that I can write about and share. I think the challenge actually is not the writing itself necessarily, although writing is hard. The challenge is life. Like, you know, how do you put enough of life aside so that it doesn't stop you from creating? And I feel like for me, that's the hardest part. And the process, as long as you honor it and respect it, like it will always give to you.
Right.
And so that's what I just try to do, is just like, right, whilst I'm still alive and I'm still having these ideas, I'm just going to do it, because one day the ideas might stop or the energy might stop. And then, you know, I want to look back and be like, yeah, I did something that I enjoyed.
Yeah, I said what I had to say.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. He's dropping jewels, people. So listen up and you know, get your pens. Like, stop beating yourself up. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah,
beating yourself up. Just do. It'll
just do.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Just
It'll
do.
be what it's gonna be. And like you said, I love how you ended that, is that you're going to at a point look back and say, wow. Like,
yeah.
I
Yeah.
did, you know,
and you want to have no regrets. Like, I say this to people, like, no place to call home. So when I finished the draft, I was lucky enough to have an agent, and then it goes out to submission to publishers, right? So I'm like, right, I'm ready. You know, it's gonna be the next big thing, like all of that, right? Internet, like all of. I was like, yeah. And then I thought, okay, what I'm gonna do, because you know the typical writer story is like, oh, there's so and so, I got so many rejections, and then now, and blah blah blah. So I was like, for each rejection that I'm gonna get, or that I do get, I'm gonna print it out and stick it up on my wall, right?
Nice.
Like, yeah, boom. So the first 5 came in, I was like, all right, yeah, okay, cool, okay, cool. And then it got to like 10, and I was like, bruh. And I kid you not, yeah. So my agent, she used to send me each rejection like email kind of directly or whatever.
Yeah.
And they got to be so many rejections that she just put it all on a PDF and didn't even include the email. It was just like an Excel spreadsheet of which publishing house it was and whether it was yes or no. And there was many, right? But all it takes is one.
Yes.
Yeah. And then, especially at the time as well, it was like, oh, but you're a poet, can you write novels? I didn't know. And there was a few who was interested, but it was like, oh, you know, can't really place you. We don't know who would read you, whatever. All of these kind of like typical stuff. And then my agent told me, go with the person who you feel who is most passionate about your book, who's most passionate about your story. And when I found that publisher, I was like, yes, this is that person. And we went forward and we did what he did. And we had emails from other publishers afterwards saying, oh, if I knew then what I know now, I would have changed my mind. I didn't get a chance to read it like I, normally would have. I hope you will work with us in the future, and so forth and so forth. And so I say that to say, like, rejection is hard, but don't reject yourself. Just give yourself a chance and just keep going. Like, even if it just takes one person to believe in you, like, that's all that, and that can just transform everything, right? And I can't tell you, like, the amount of times I felt like giving up, guys, honestly, like, this all seems quite easy from the outward, quite like, yeah, but I've given up 1,000 times. And then the next day I've woken up and been like, you're not really going to give up, though, are you? I'm like, I know.
There you go. See, the petty part of me is like, kick rocks. You should have got to me then.
Exactly. Right?
Yeah, but you gotta keep it, you gotta keep it moving. This is
you gotta be professional.
Yeah, right, exactly. You gotta keep it moving. And like you said, amazing piece of it is, right, because folks don't see all that back end, they don't see that self-doubt that happens, see this finished piece and not realize, there was a hill to climb to get exhausted. They see you, but it's like, I'm exhausted where I am now. But again, I keep going back to what you just said. Is like, there's going to be a point where you're moving, and then you turn around, look, and say, "Wow, look at what I've done. Look at what I've accomplished."
Exactly.
Amazing. So, God, I got so. Go ahead. You're gonna say something.
No, I was just gonna add, even because it's like just saying yes to yourself, right? And I remember I have this vivid image. So I grew up in Camden Town in London, North London. And I remember when I was about 14 years old, there was a guy on the high street who was selling paper printouts of his book, right? To people, for whatever they could afford. And I was like, wow, like this was before I even had any idea that I would have anything to do with writing. But he had printed them out, all A4 sheets of paper, stapled them together, and was selling his novel to people. And I stood there just watching him talk to people, telling the people what the book was about, and so forth. I didn't buy one. I didn't have any money. I was a kid, and I was like, wow, that person, was just believed in himself so much. And I never got his name, didn't get the title, but I'm like, this person, might have written something and given it to someone whose lives was impacted by it, right? And I think the same way. I'm like, who would I be if I never got to listen to you in an open mic? Like, do you know what I mean? I don't know. And there's a person that you're going to impact so deeply without even realizing. So when you reject yourself, you close the door to all of that, And I think that we have to try as much as possible to say yes to ourselves and yes to each other. Like, we live in a society of no's so much. Like, saying yes is actually quite radical.
That's so true. That's so true. God, I got so much to talk to you about. I want to give us some time so we can hear so you read some of your work. I just have a couple more questions before we get into that. Now, when I read your work, at least for me, there's such a sense of necessary, right? It ignites for me this sense of urgency to either funny because we've touched on it, this idea of being able to look back and reassess like what I'm doing. Now, when you look at like Mask Off, Masculinity Redefined, for example, it's such for me, again, a necessary commentary on like the perceptions of masculinity. In the book, you go from like examining phrases like man up or that's gay to the impact of class. You touch on how some of this stuff is perpetuated through the digital landscape we're maneuvering through now. All of that, like, what is it that made you decide to like, hey, this is something I want to unpack? And that's something that I want to unpack, but something I want to unpack and share to the populace. Like how did that happen?
I mean, so like I said earlier, like it was like, so everything I've written has been an accumulation of stuff that I've been thinking about for years, right? And so I remember, I think this was maybe like when I was started uni or something, university. Came across Bell Hooks. Just love Bell Hooks. I highly recommend literally all of her books.
Yeah.
And I read Will to Change and We Real Cool, which is about masculinity and Black masculinity, respectively. And when I was, you know, an 18-year-old, like, teenager who thought he knew it all, right? Like, I was like, who is this woman to write about masculinity, and how can she tell me about being a man? And I read it, and Bell Hooks read me to absolute bits, and I was like, whoa. I felt like she had gone inside me and written everything that I had been hiding to the world, right? Without ever having met me. And I was like, how is that possible? And so through the years, through whether it's conversations, house parties with guys, you know, where it'd be like, you know, there's always that bit of a house party where everyone's just going wild, and then suddenly it feels like it goes quiet, and there's just you and maybe someone else or a few other people, and you start having this really deep conversation before it goes back to normal. Like there's those kind of moments, and there's moments that I was speaking with guys and guys were being vulnerable, you know, playing basketball, where it's like I'm seeing guys cry and talk about this or that in the locker rooms. You know, people talk about locker room talk, and turns out the misogyny, but also the other side is like the vulnerability, right? Like that doesn't get spoken about. And I just started seeing those patterns where the perception of maleness and manness and masculinity versus like the nuanced reality of it was two different things. And it got to a point where I just felt I just had to continue writing about it. So I wrote a poem called Real Men, which, you know, that was like, I wrote that in like 2012 or something. And then I was, you know, in my poetry collections and my older stuff, I was writing different poems, kind of exploring masculinity, until in 2018, I initially got approached by Pluto Press to write about kind of my refugee experience. And then I was thinking, actually, no, I really want to write about masculinity, especially in terms of like my own experience coming up from Congo, the way that we dress, the way that, you know, men will hold hands walking down the street. Men will kiss each other to say hello. You know, it's funny. Especially this is very normal in Francophone culture. There's like a YouTube comedian in France called Boris Becker. That's his like silly. He does a lot of silly videos. When I need to watch content that's just stupid, I just watch his stuff. But he does this prank video where he goes up to the men, like cheek to cheek, to kiss them to say hello, and there's men who are like preparing their cheek to, you know, to say hello, and then he just walks on, and then they get angry, like, what are you doing? Right? And that's very normal in Francophone culture. But in Anglophone culture, if a guy came up to you with his cheek out to kiss you, that's seen a certain way. And so there's all these nuances where in one culture it's masculine, in another culture it's not masculine. And I just wanted to write something essentially for my 18-year-old self, or my teenage self, who thought he knew it all, and say, look, man, don't spend all those years basically wondering if you're insane because things weren't adding up. The reason why things weren't adding up, because none of it makes sense. You're not given the right information.
And you're not so, you know.
Exactly. Exactly. And so, that's what that was really. It was almost like a bit of a love letter to my younger self, but also to anyone at any stage who may be coming into the conversation. And, you know, I felt really kind of privileged because I'd gotten quite a lot of feedback from people who were from all different parts of the world and different ages. Like a lot of older men as well were like messaging me, talking about how the book impacted them So, you know, I was really appreciative of that. And I was still learning myself, like I am still learning about this, you know, it's an everyday process.
Yeah, that is really interesting. You talk about like how you know in different places there's different cultural like acceptances. Now you have your books and they're translated in multiple languages, right? Do you ever worry or think about like what is your thought on are they going to get like does this narrative translate now, you know,
Mm,
placed in Brazil, placed in France? Does that
mm.
ever come to mind?
You know, I think one thing is we live in an increasingly globalized world. So in terms of like different cultures, we are much closer than we realize. But also, I think one thing that I found is that the more specific or detailed you are about kind of your singular experience, people can learn from that and apply that to their own, even if they haven't gone through it. So if it's like you take a particular context and say, hey man, where I'm from, like if you walk down the street and a guy and you know, if you as a guy and another guy, you're walking towards each other and you stare at each other too long,
Mm,
that might be trouble,
right.
right? But if you nod, then it's, you know, it's
Yeah.
affection. And
Right.
then, you know, someone might come from somewhere else and be like, yo, that happens too. Oh, that happens too here. Or another place might be like, oh, actually, you know, here it's not that, but it's this.
Right.
You know, over there, it's not that, but it's this. And there's always like comparative ways that we learn about our own kind of realities, or people learn about their own realities through seeing the reality that's presented elsewhere. And so I just try to provide a bit of detail and then try to get people to reflect on their own experience. And usually you'll find that like people are able to understand like quite easily, regardless of whatever cultural background they're from, because these concepts are reflecting inequalities that exist worldwide, but just manifest differently. Patriarchy, sexism, racism, etc., are all universal, unfortunately,
Yeah.
but they're nuanced. So one thing doesn't always apply in the same way, but there's always a context in which through which it could be understood.
But yeah, I'm dropping what looks like a ruby in the chat box that's just saying jewels. You are dropping jewels. So folks know there's a universal
I
jewel.
appreciate that, man.
You know,
These are just conversations I also have in my head, like all the time. Like
yeah,
I'm just walking down the street, like so.
yeah, yeah. No, this is great. This is great, and this is exactly what I want. Is to again, you know, the whole point of BBB is to get this stuff out and share with folks. We're gonna get into the reading. I promise. It's just it's been so long, man. I've got so much to talk to you to ask.
It's all right, man.
So I want to go to the selfless act of breathing. Right.
Mm.
I've here that folks are not going to see because oh wait, I got it. There we go. The selfless act of breathing. So yes, yes. So I got to tell you, you know, I mentioned before, and I won't admit this in court that I stalk, but I remember going to Twitter, right, and seeing I first saw when I first saw you post that the book was acquired by BRON Studios for film adaptation. And I remember throwing my hands in the air and yelling like, that's how you effing do it, right? The problem was is that this was on a Zoom meeting. I was like in the middle of a Zoom. luckily I was muted. So they just saw me throw my hands up in the air like, and you know, and I just lied about something and said I was something excited about that happened.
Oh man, that's sweet.
But I remember that to this day, and so I was so chuffed about it. And for you non-UK folks, that just means I was excited about what's going. But talk to me about like how that happened. Like how did you find out? Where were you when you found that out? I mean, that's such an amazing accomplishment.
I mean, wow. So yeah, so the book, so the film, where you know what? I remember I got an email from my agent and was like, oh, so and so, you know, BRON Studios, the producer, Ryan, he was interested and wanted to have a conversation, and etc. etc. And this was before the book was published. And I try not to get too excited about things before they happen. I can be quite a kind of cynic or pessimist sometimes. And it's like, yeah, okay, yeah, right. A studio wants to talk to me about this book or whatever. So and this was during just 2020, so everything was Zoom, online, pandemic. We're doing however many Zooms a day.
Yeah.
And I remember just thinking, this story means so much to me. More important, to me, more important than it being made into a movie was that it gets made right, and that the delicacy and the sensitivity and the compassion is portrayed and carried on, not that it's just made into a movie and details are missed, because this book is so nuanced and is so sensitive in many ways. And I remember just talking with Ryan, and we just hit it off, and he was so he showed so much compassion and understanding, and I was like, wow, okay, yeah, let's go for it. And I think I sometimes have a bit of a delayed reaction to things. I don't get happy straight away. I might not, I don't even know if I'm happy about it yet, because
it's real. Yeah.
It may hit me. Yeah, it's not real yet. I'm like, I don't know how I get excited about this. I don't know. How does someone react to this, But yeah, it's moving along. We've got an amazing screenwriter to adapt it, Keenan Scott II, who's a playwright, and plays on Broadway and stuff. And I've chatted with him, and I mean, he showed me the notes that he has made for the book. And the thing is, it's when I wrote this book, I'm now about 5 years removed from it, because I'd been working on it for so long, and then I moved on, and then the publishing process is slower. So I'm like, boom. So he's coming back to me and saying, what did you mean when you wrote this? And that? I was like, brother, I was in a trance. I don't I don't remember. I don't know. And he's highlighted so much, and he's just captured so much of the sensitivity and the feel of what I was trying to communicate in the novel, that I'm like, I mean, the movie industry, the film industry is outrageous at the moment, and it always has been. But if this gets made into kind of a film and it goes through the whole process, for me, that will be a dream, And I think things are just happening where I never imagined that stuff like this would happen. Even just being published, And I think to myself, when I go back to the point when I had the idea for this book, and I was like, yo, man, this is a bit mad, to say the least, It's in the UK, we say, yeah, that's a bit mad. And I told my agent, and my agent was like, yeah, that is a bit of a mad idea, but if you're going to write it, make sure you go all in, don't hold back. So I was like, right, I'm going to go all in. And I had no idea what would happen. But I just know that I gave everything that I possibly could. I said yes, to myself, to the idea, to everything at each possible stage. And things have happened that, I could only dream about. And so, yeah, when hearing how you reacted and seeing other people around me get happy as well, I'm like, yeah, this is meaningful, And I've always kind of dreamed about making, or seeing on screen, a beautiful movie, a beautiful film. I feel like there's not, fewer and fewer, we live in a time where there's beautiful films that are out there.
Yes.
And I really want to see more of that. And so to be in a position where something I wrote contributes to that, for me, it's so exciting.
That's fantastic. All right, my producer has been helping me out here and just been basically, you're talking too much, let this man read. So I need to transition and get you to share some of your work with us.
Yeah, sure, man. I appreciate it. And thank you to everyone listening as well. I think, I'll share a few poems and maybe a couple poems, whatever the mood is like, and then read from Selfless, etc. And then I think we're doing questions after. Is it
yeah. So what we'll do is we'll see how time goes. I have do some questions. I have a quick fire round, and then we'll see if the audience has questions for you.
Okay.
But we go, I know 12, that we can go a little bit over.
Okay. All right, let me know how I'm doing for time and if you want me to, bring it back to the quick fire round, etc. But yeah.
All right.
So yeah, we spoke a bit about my refugee experience in that poem. So I'll read that poem. The poem is called Refuge, and Refuge. Imagine how it feels to be chased out of home, to have your grip ripped, loosened from your fingertips, something you so dearly held onto. Like a lover's hand that slips when pulled away, you are always reaching. My father would speak of home, reaching. Speaking of familiar faces, the girl next door would eventually grow up to be my mother, the fruit seller at the market, the lonely man at the top of the road who nobody spoke to, and our house at the bottom of the street, lit up by a single flickering lamp where beyond was only darkness. There, they would sit and tell stories of monsters that lurked and came only at night to catch the children who sat and listened to stories of monsters that lurked. This is how they lived. Each memory buried, an artifact left to be discovered by archaeologists, the last words on a dying family member's lips. This was sacred. Not even monsters could taint it. But there were monsters that came during the day, monsters that tore families apart of their giant hands and fingers that slept on triggers. The sound of gunshots ripping through the sky became familiar like the tapping of rainfall on a windowsill. Monsters that would kill and hide behind speeches, suits, and ties. Monsters that would chase families away, forcing them to leave everything behind. I remember when we first stepped off the plane. Everything was foreign, unfamiliar, uninviting. Even the air in my lungs left me short of breath. We came here to find refuge. They called us refugees, so we hid ourselves in their language until we sounded just like them, changed the way we dressed to look just like them, made this our home until we lived just like them and began to speak of familiar faces, the girl next door who'd eventually grow up to be a mother, the fruit seller at the market, the lonely man at the top of the road who nobody spoke to, and our house at the bottom of the street, lit up by a single flickering lamp to keep away the darkness there. We would sit and watch police that lurked and came only at night to arrest the youth who sat and watched police that lurked. This is how we lived. I remember one day I heard them say to me, they come here to take our jobs. They need to go back to where they came from. Not knowing that I was one of the ones who came, I told them that a refugee is simply someone who is trying to make a home. So next time, when you go home, tuck your children in, kiss your families goodnight, be glad that the monsters never came for you in their suits and ties, never came for you in the newspapers with the media lies, never came for you that you are not despised. I know that deep inside the hearts of each and every one of us, we are all always reaching for a place that we can call home. Thank you. Yeah, so that was Refuge. I'm gonna read, I haven't read this poem for a while, but this poem is called Real Men, which was one of kind of like the early writings where I was like trying to figure out masculinity and what this means. What is this mess that we're kind of like embedded in of being a man? Yeah, and just trying to put it into words. So yeah, the poem is called Real Men. I was told to be a man, a real man. Apparently that meant never to cry. That meant my eyes had to be like shutters. So when it came to feelings, my emotions were like a church monastery. I had none. I was told that to cry was to show weakness. But in this world, you have to be strong to survive. Walk with a mask on your face, a screw face, and never show what's going on inside from young. We were taught how to make guns out of fingers until we became old enough to shoot them. Guard your heart from the start. We danced bad to Michael Jackson Thriller until we became real life smooth criminals, conditioned by the subliminal. It isn't our human nature. It is indoctrination. Our voices were silenced, so we practiced violence on all platforms from PlayStation and Xbox to that boy Michael's face. We were never taught it was wrong, because as a real man, anger is the only conditioned, accepted response. Just think of how uncomfortable you get when you see a grown man cry. Think of the number of times when your mother said, wipe your tears, big boys don't cry. So it's no surprise to see that in society, men commit up to 90% of all violent crimes because we are always angry inside. So to be a real man is to live a lie. I was told to be a real man. So misogynistic words like bitches lingered in the tidbits of our tongues. We lived in concrete blocks with no gardens, but were still asked where the hoes at. Listen, bro, fact is we were lied to. We were told that it's okay for a man to sleep with as many women as he wants, but we were never told about love, never told that love could heal the greatest pain like a needle to the vein is the drug that we need. I wish we could sell bags of love instead of crack or weed. Just imagine the change that you would see. Crack addicts would just be people who are high on love, and crack babies would just be babies who were born with love, and rehab would be where all the haters went. The fact is we were lied to. Given negative images for us to aspire to. So to be a real man is just another lie too. So this goes out to all the men who are real because they have beating hearts, who aren't afraid to cry, men whose emotions show as clear as the moonlit sky, men who write poetry in the middle of the night and read books and meet up at the coffee shop or the library to discuss bell hooks. We rule. Cool men who can say I love you or give each other a hug without saying no homo. Men who can speak of love openly. Like an envelope, open me and you will see what is written inside. Men who want love, but not the kind you make in the club, the kind that your ancestors once spoke of. It isn't a myth. Imagine roses are red, written in hieroglyphs, ode to a naked beauty in Mercure script, Swahili spoken word across the Serengeti, about how the sunrise over the horizon reminds us of the beauty in a woman's face when she smiles. Listen, bro, fact is, we were lied to. Given negative images for us to aspire to. So why would you want to be a real man when you can be you? So be you. Do not be confined by society's ideals because real men don't exist. Only men who are real. Thank you, thank you. Man, you know what? I don't do much poetry these days. So sharing poems, there's just a weightlessness. I can't, I can't. No, thank you guys for listening, man, because I'm alone here in my flat and I just feel like I'm surrounded. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't feel,
This is your space.
Wow.
Do what you need to do.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, this poem I'll read next. Is again, so there's a quote. I can't remember who said it, and I'm probably paraphrasing it, but it's like, if you water a poem, it turns into a novel, right? And so when I first started writing novels, people would ask me, okay, but are you a poet or a novelist? Like, for me, I didn't see any difference, you know. They were just expressions of like the same world, the same idea, and so forth. And so, yeah, this poem is called "To Those with Wings for Feet Who Keep on Running, Please Do Not Run, Fly." Most days, I spend my days trying to figure out what the days mean, and I'm stuck. Stuck between caring too much and not caring enough, between holding on too long and letting go too easily, feet stumbling beneath me, trying to follow this narrow path. I look around, and all I see are faces that laugh, grass, greener on the other side, eyes wide, brimming smiles and full hearts. Music on blast, and a nervous excitement from the accidental touch of two lovers at the start. I look at myself, and I'm going nowhere fast. Maybe this is just a facade, a shallow mask to cover up the fact that we are all hurting inside, that no amount of pride could dry the sea of tears, years of pain, waiting for the clouds to clear, fear settling like dust. And you know what? Some days I am just tired. Some days I'm barely strong enough to carry the burden of this heavy heart, let alone the weight of the world on my shoulders. Some days I need space on my own, no internet, no mobile phone. And some days I just want to run away from it all. But then on some days I hear a voice call in the back of my mind. Each syllable sounds like a little droplet of light falling on deaf eyes that wander through the darkness. And it says to me, why would you want to run when you have wings for feet? Fly. So this is to all those with wings for feet who keep on running. Please do not run. Fly. Fly like the poet's pen off the page. Fly like it was your 12th birthday and you just made the biggest wish and blew out a candle with a flame the size of the sun, and the darkness of the universe is now your living room. Fly. Like a midnight moonlight city cyclist with headphones on going downhill with no hands. Fly. Like a runner in the park racing against the sunset. No regrets. Like every mistake you've ever made has just been washed away. Fly. Like your new crush has just noticed you looking fly and has walked up to you holding roses and chocolates to ask you out on a date. And they're paying. Fly like you never stopped believing in love. Like you weren't the only one. There was a time when everything you imagined was real. Your mind is the most powerful instrument that you will ever own. Only second to your heart, which you feel. And they are made of one and the same, so fly. Fly like you're not worried about the days, the months, and the years of getting older, because each day that you live is the youngest that you will ever be, and we live eternally. In each dream, in each sleep, we keep a piece of ourselves just to give to each other. So this is to all those with wings for feet who keep on running. Please do not run, fly. I'll share one more poem. No, actually, no. I'll read from Selfless. Yeah, so I think, yeah, maybe if this is this, I mean, I'm happy to read some more afterwards, but you just let me know. But yeah, I'll share this and then.
You got time, brother.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay. So just to kind of tell you a bit about the novel, the novel's called The Selfless Act of Breathing. I think this might be coming up backwards or something, I don't know, but yeah, The Selfless Act of Breathing. Oh, it's good. Okay, great. The Selfless Act of Breathing. It's a novel about a young man named Michael, who is a teacher at an inner city school in London. Michael is very passionate about what he does, but he's, excuse me, kind of reached a stage in his life where he's having quite a crisis. And that crisis, that experience of crisis culminates in him deciding to take his life savings of around $9,000 to book a flight to America, to spend the money and live as he wishes. And after which all the money he's spent, he plans to end his life. And so it's kind of a story that's told in two parts, where you are both in the story, but also alongside Michael, kind of on this journey with him. And, you know, many things happen to him when he gets to America, but also it tells a story about his experiences here in London as well. His best friends, story of love and career and so forth. And on the surface, everything looks fine. But beneath all of that, there's this real sense of like longing and desire, particularly like if you think of desire, try to, you know, we often think of desire in the physical, but try to imagine whatever desire would feel like if it were non-physical and that. And so the passage that I'll read now, which I just realized might actually be quite fitting because this part is set in California. I promise I didn't plan this in advance, but I'm just like, actually, yeah, it works. And Michael is kind of on this walk and he's noticing things around him. So yeah, this is chapter 12. Michael walks up 64th Street. It is a quiet and serene Sunday morning. He is alone, save the cool breeze trailing him. He hears his footsteps crunching the autumn leaves on the ground. His tan brown boots blend in with the fallen leaves from the parallel trees that lead all the way up. The houses are neatly arranged and painted with colors of the different shades, gray to blue, red, all white, and so on. He feels out of place, out of body. He passes house after house that appears alive with memory. Up ahead, he sees an older woman approaching. Her dog, a cute black-haired breed of something he cannot name, scuffles in front on a leash. He prepares a smile to greet her. To his left, Michael notices a house different from the rest. It is dilapidated, worn, its wooden panels faded, paintwork peeling like flaking skin. An overgrown bright green bush spreads onto the sidewalk and up the walls on the outside. It covers the garage door and submerges the car, contrasting against its beetle sky blue rusty paintwork. There are 2 windows on the second floor. One is boarded up and the other is cracked, hanging glass in between the edges. There's black metal fence covering them, adjacent to a set of stairs that leads to a boarded up front door. This house is tired of life. This house looks how I feel. Michael takes a seat on the front steps. The older woman appears, her dog leading the way with its wagging tail. She is not startled by his presence, though he had expected her to be. They exchange greetings. Her excited dog comes to him. She likes you, the older woman says, and she doesn't like many people. I was just walking by and I noticed the house, Michael says, pointing. Do you know what happened to it? Oh, she responds. There was a terrible fire. She pauses. About 2 years ago. The older woman continues, saying the woman who owns the house kept mentioning she would restore it, but never did. Michael stands in silence, absorbing the story. She pauses, says goodbye, and walks off with her dog. He continues up the road, thinking about this house that was once a home, about the memories lingering alive in each of the rooms, the laughter, the crying, the smells of cooked food, of perfumes, then of burning, of burning, of burning. Maybe homes are much like people too. Like homes, we also need to be taken care of as much as we can and to have something live inside us in order for us to live. But regardless, in the end, we eventually go back to nature, back to death, submerged by the will of the earth. And in our most earnest moments, maybe we are all just homes burning, and love is the water that saves us. And maybe love is that someone who still sees in all the burned down brokenness of our house, the beauty in us, the stories and memories that we hold inside and restores us and makes us home.
So maybe we are all just homes burning. That is, yeah, I don't have words for it right now.
Thank you.
No, definitely, man. Thank you so much for sharing your work with us. And again, I know this is just a sort of a drop in, the wealth of work you have. So I implore everyone who's on the call now on the show today and who's listening to this later on, like, look this brother up. There's so much in his work, and there's so much, as you pointed out, so much nuance to what you write and how you write, that I just recommend everyone just experience a bit of JJ. Soon.
Sure you.
Oh, definitely. So I want to jump to a couple questions that may have popped up in the chat. I'm seeing, there's one from another phenomenal brother, Joseph Santiago, that's out in this neck of the woods. He says he loves your voice. Any audio recordings or albums in the works?
I appreciate you, Joseph, man. Thank you. You know what? Not at the moment, but I would love to, hopefully one day. So yeah, you might have, inspired something to actually like give me a kick to try it. That's one thing I haven't said yes to in terms of myself. I'm always just like, but yeah, let me think about it. But I'd love to do that. I just love reading and yeah, so if I get the opportunity to do that, I would definitely love to.
And it's funny, just ask that, like, one of the things I was going to put in the chat is what you guys don't know, that what, you know, Zoom or you know, the little square boxes don't tell you is how tall people are. Like, there's is very, very tall. And so remember, there's moments in the space in the UK, you know, with folks that have made an impact in sort of my creative sort of world, and just living in the UK going back. And this brother was one of them. And it's just, I remember being at a show, and I think, oh God, I don't remember if this was at South Bank or I don't remember, but it was a red hat. You had a red.
Oh yeah.
Right. And so you can imagine being on stage reading, and then in the corner, you just see this like figure of a man with red hat. And it was like my focal point, right? So, you know, how you kind of, as you're doing poetry, you know, you span the room to make sure you have contact with them. But like, you were my anchor on this side. This was the first time, I think it was the first time I met you. And you were my anchor as I was going back. And then show's over, and you know, you're talking to folks and such. And I remember, and I don't know what voice I thought you were gonna have. I don't know what I thought, but I walked up and you said, "What's up?" And I was just like I was blown, like all of like 2.2 seconds. Like I stood back and I was like, okay, that makes sense. I remember that vividly. I don't know why, but Joseph, that question brought back that memory for me. And I think it just goes to say, you know, sort of who you are, at least from my perspective as an individual, and my experience with you is that you were always this like presence that you knew was there, you know, and even, and but non-obtrusive. To be, it's an art to have the frame you have and not to be, you know, obtrusive in a space. And I don't know if that's coming off right, but it's like it's kind of the nuance and the delicacy that you have within the frame you have, and that's just a whole thing within itself that talks to sort of who you are as an individual. So I do really, really appreciate that. Are there any other questions in chat? Please, if you have some, put them in chat. You have any questions for us? Any questions? I've never done this before. This is new. I love it. You have any questions for us? So yeah, if you do, but in between this time, I'm gonna go to my see what time it is. Oh, here's one. Will you ever be in California in the near future?
I hope so. I definitely hope so. I mean, I love California. I was there in 2015/16. And I think when the book was published, unfortunately, it was published during COVID, pandemic lockdown, and stuff, so I couldn't travel. But the paperback comes out next year, I think in February. So we definitely are trying to just kind of like arrange something. Yeah, and if anything in terms of like California, particularly, because California is my favorite state, I would definitely be announcing it. So yeah, just look out for it, really.
Absolutely. I was gonna we got to figure out how to make that happen. Like, one of the ways we want to sort of expand Beautiful Black Books is to have it like in person in a studio and such. So, you know, it's that was the original sort of vision of this. But you know, as you said, COVID happened and such, so we had to sort of reframe it. But we definitely want to get it back to sort of, you know, have some sessions here with Zoom, which is great, because then we get to bring you all the way here from London virtually, right? But also if we can do that in person, that'd be fantastic. All right, I'm gonna jump into a couple. There's two sections really quickly, and if anyone has questions, they can, you know, throw them in the chat. We'll get to them. But the first one is you are in an elevator, right, or lift, to be precise.
Right.
You're in a lift. for 3 hours. You can pick any 3 people to be in that lift with for 3 hours, present, past, future. Who would those 3 people be?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. Now, a lift is a small space. That's the first thing.
Well, in America, it's a little bigger.
A little bigger, okay, because these UK lifts, tiny.
Yeah.
And also, I guess one thing to think about is, are these people going to be in conversation with each other? So it's all of us talking. It's not just me and who I like. So they have to think about how they would vibe off each other. So I think I would go bell hooks.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is tough, man. This is tough. I would go bell hooks, right? I would go LeBron James.
Okay.
And I would go oh, that third person is just crucial, isn't it? It's
hard.
like that third person is basically the difference maker. Like, it's either going to be a good conversation or we're all going to be in silence. Like, you know. And I think that third person for me would probably be, oh man, like I want to go out there a little bit and choose someone who I may not necessarily like typically be in conversation with. Oh, okay, Chester Bennington from the lead singer of Linkin Park.
Really?
Like that would, yeah, I loved Linkin, honestly, yeah, I'd loved Linkin Park growing up. And yeah, so I think that as a blend is just, yeah.
That is super.
Could be interesting.
That's super interesting.
It could be great or terrible.
Yeah, but you know what's funny? And again, this is testimony to who you are as an individual. I've asked this question many a time, and right or wrong, it's interpretation. And the way people attack this usually is sort of like, I want to know something from, all these questions I've always wanted to ask person. I don't think I've ever gotten a response where part of that consideration was how they will interact with each other, not just sort of what I'm going to get out of it, but the time you think about like how I want this to be good for everyone, which I want to point out because again, it is testimony to who you are as an individual.
Oh, I appreciate that.
So that's fantastic. I am going to go to now my, we're going to end it with my quick fire round, right? And so what I do here is I just name, I put out some words, right? And I just want the first thing to come to your mind, right? A single word, 2 or 3 words, but there's no thinking here. This is like whatever comes to mind at your first response. All right, so here we go. First one, Congo.
Peace.
Words.
Poetry.
Language.
Life.
King Leopold.
Oh gosh. Fire burn. Hell burning, I don't know.
Exactly. Blank canvas.
Art.
Man.
Oh, the first thing that came was fragile,
Black man.
Whole. And I don't think I should be explaining this, and I don't know if I should be.
If you want, you can.
But the whole was like not necessarily where we are as Black men, but where we could be, and so that's what you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
like man. I think of man. When I think man, I think about the fragility of where we are. But thinking of Black man or Black men, I'm always thinking about where we could be, like, what is it going to take to get to that place where we're like, we can rest and just be, you know. So that's what I mean by whole.
Gotcha. Success.
People.
Happiness.
Peace.
Joy.
Oh, carrot cake.
Black joy.
Oh, my mother's smile.
Oh, I love that. Woman.
Oh, I was gonna say life, but I feel like I said life already. So I'm gonna say love because I am currently in that.
Gotcha. All right. Monarchy.
Abolish.
Love.
Home.
Ralph Ellison.
America.
Fatherhood.
Ooh. Nerves, I think I would say. Just nerves.
Okay. Basketball.
Hoop dreams, man. Do you know what I mean? Like, just that, you know, I think in everyone who's played basketball, regardless of whether you still play at whatever level you might have played at or association, even if it's just like in the park or whatever, I think everyone still believes that if something had happened a little bit differently, they would have been in the NBA.
That's so true. Hey, that's so true. It's like it's one
thing.
If I could stroke that 3-pointer, oh, I would have. Not to mention, I have asthma and I can't breathe. But
I'm like, bro, for me, I'm like, you get injured literally every time you step on the floor.
But I could.
You would have had a 6-month NBA career. Nobody would have made it, man.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I love it. Next one is loss.
Searching.
Slavery.
Ancestors.
Prime Minister.
Abolish. Just, yeah.
Yeah. Pain.
Ooh, suffering.
Religion.
Systemic.
Pen.
Freedom.
Purpose.
The word that came was authenticity. And I think, and even I've struggled with this in the sense of like, you know, it's like, what's your purpose? What's your purpose? And for a long time, I thought my purpose was like, you know, basketball, just something else, right? I never realized anything to do with writing or anything like that. And why I said authenticity was because, well, if you focus on just being who you are, your purpose will come. Do you know what I mean? It will align. Just be who you are and take that wherever you go. And being who you are authentically is your purpose. The thing that you do is just the vehicle for that. And so, yeah, that's authenticity.
It's funny because the next word is integrity.
You know what? So integrity, so I wouldn't say word, but I think what I would say with integrity is, well, my idea is that you do what you would do even if no one was looking. Like, you know, and for me, I've always deeply believed that I would have, even if I never got published and no one ever read my work or whatever, I would have, these books would still exist. I would have still written these things.
Right.
So they needed to be. Yeah. I'm just very lucky that, you know, it came to be published, but I would have just continued to write. So yeah, it's just kind of like carrying on being who you are, even when no one's paying attention.
Absolutely. And the last one I have for you today is youth.
Oh man, youth. I would say time. because, you know, it's like the saying, you know, young people or youth, in your youth, you have all the time, right? But you don't have the wisdom. And as you get older, you have the wisdom, and then you don't have the time,
Exactly.
you know, all the energy. And it's like, I look back at my youth, and now that, like, you know, I'm struggling for time for things,
Yeah.
I look back at all the time that I did have where I thought I was busy, and I'm like, guy,
Exactly. That wasn't anything.
you had so much time,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know.
But it's the journey
So,
that's
yeah.
before, right? It's
Yeah.
that the journey. Yeah. So look, I could talk to you for 15 more hours with so many more questions, man. And maybe that's the next iteration of this is when you come to California, we can do this.
Oh, absolutely, man. Absolutely.
But you know, I wanted to thank everyone for joining today, and for folks watching and reading this and listening to it later on. But you know, Vicky, who's on the call today, just put something in chat that really encapsulates sort of how I feel about you and how I feel like folks should sort of end understanding your work, right? Is that your writing is helping others in a big way. And
Thank you, man.
that, you know, that
Thank you,
response, you know, is twofold. And it's one for us, right, to understand what your work is doing and to sort of promote others as this goes on into perpetuity, to experience your work. That's one side of it. The other side of it is for you to know, right, that your work is helping others in a big way. When we're in the space, when we're in the belly of stuff, we don't always get a chance to see how we impact folks. You know, and I say that from a very personal perspective. You know, there's a couple of folks while I was in the UK in the muck and mire that would pull me out, and that don't pull me out of the mess, and they have no idea that's what they were doing. And you were one of those individuals. So again,
thank you.
Opportunity to thank you now and do better about keeping in touch. I keep saying that to folks. I just have to do better in keeping in touch. But
listen, you know what, for me, I really appreciate what you said, man, and just like, you know, everyone who's just given up a bit of their time to listen, and I just think that life is just so beautiful if we allow ourselves to experience it, and we're so focused on just like how things should be rather than what could be.
yeah,
You know, and that requires a certain level of like letting go. And, you know, that you say like my work is helping people, I'm really almost like, I feel so privileged and just and humbled to be able to be in that position, because I feel like it's helping me, you know. So I'm not like, people often like help others from a point of like, well, this is what I did, you know, to get out of this situation.
right.
You're going through it now. This is what you need to do to be like me. I'm like, no, I'm right there with you. Like, we're trying to figure this out together.
Yeah.
You know, here we are, and let's move forward. Like, and so it really does mean a lot, man, because it's like, I think I think it's Naira Wahid, the poet, or was it Warsan? I don't know. She writes about, you know, kind of like people talking about the world ending. I'm paraphrasing. People talk about the world ending, and she says how the world has ended for her many times, and then she's still woken up the next morning.
Yeah.
You know, and I think about that, and I'm like, yo, I'm here. Like, and I look back in the amount of times that I've literally figured like, this is the last thing. I can't make it through this. Like, I can't. And I'm like, wow. So we all have hope, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm just like trying to maybe pass that on a little bit. I don't know, but yeah, thank you, man. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, next time you're in London, please, man, just we'll go for some carrot cake.
Yes, indeed.
And
you know, that is like literally my favorite. Every time my wife asks me what kind of cake you want for your birthday, I'm like, why are you even asking? You know what it is. So But no, this has definitely been an experience. It has been a pleasure. Again, I'm so humbled that you spent the time in your Saturday evening to come to chat with me, and for everyone on the call to spend their quality time talking to us. So good, you take care. You be safe, and you know, you on the y'all better get to reading. Okay, get to reading. Well, you're not seeing anything, but you know what I'm talking about. Mask Off, The Selfless Act of Breathing, and the multitude of other great pieces of necessity that you have to experience from this individual. So look, take care, man. See you soon. Again, everyone, thanks for joining, and have a good rest of your day or your evening.
Thank you. Take care, guys. Thank you.